Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Roadie Storytime, where I just kind of tell my stories and experiences of working for bands and touring and share a little, experience and insight about how stuff works. And today is going to be less experience and insight because as voted on by the Twitch chat, we are going to be talking about how I actually got the nickname Tank, what band gave that to me and how that even came about. So hello Twitch chat. If you're watching on YouTube later, you can go to twitch.tv/tankthetech where we do this stuff live and check out new music and stuff like that. But the touring community is one of those places where it seems like everyone has a nickname. Everybody. And it's often stuff that, like most good nicknames, is thought up of by other people. And oftentimes it's just like ridiculous and stupid and stuff like that. I mean, we had a guy on a tour I did once that we called Ass Juice. Like, only because in the movie Neighbors with the fraternity, there's a character in the movie named Ass Juice. That's what they called him. And this dude that worked for us just looked exactly like that actor.
You know how many BJs I've been promised? Infinite BJs. Infinite BJs.
So it became Ass Juice. And when we didn't want to say Ass Juice in front of other people or on the radio or so people could hear it, we would just say AJ. So tour nicknames come in weird times and weird places. Before the Tank thing started, my first nickname I ever had on the road, and this is so weird and dumb looking back on it now, was when I worked for Red years and years and years ago, they had nicknamed me Primetime, and nothing to do with like Deion Sanders. Was it Deion Sanders who was called Primetime? I forget. I was like 20 years old. And there was one time where I was telling a story to them and I said back when I was in my prime, like meaning when I was like 17 or something. And they started dying laughing because they were like, what do you mean when you were in your prime? You're 20 years old. So they just started calling me Primetime. All like that died after I stopped working for them. And then I didn't have a nickname for like the longest time. But today I'll tell you the nickname or the origin story of the nickname Tank that actually was assigned to me by Walk Off the Earth. If you're not familiar with Walk Off the Earth, they are a Canadian band. They've changed a lot over the years. Like the Walk Off the Earth now is not the same band that I worked for like over 10 years ago. It's mainly at this point, it's kind of the husband and wife duo of like Sarah and Gianni. And some people might know of Sarah because she used to be the singer for a punk band called Creepshow back in the day. But in 2000 and I believe it was 13 maybe or 12. I can't at the end of 12. Yeah, let's just say 2013 because I can't specifically remember. I was working for a merchandise company at the time. And they asked me if I would go out to be the lead merchandise manager for Walk Off the Earth. And I was not familiar with them. I had actually never heard of them and I had to like look them up. And it turns out they'd been a band for a little while, but they went viral on YouTube for doing that cover of Goche's Someone I Used to Know or somebody that I can't remember the actual name of the title, but where all 5 band members sang and harmonized and played the song on one acoustic guitar. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. So they went like super viral from that video and got a lot of notoriety, and they booked like their first big, North American tour and signed a contract with the merchandise company I was working with, and they asked me if I'd go out there. So I go out onto this tour, and funny enough, I was the only American on the tour. Like entire crew is Canadian, which kind of became like a joke. And there was one guy on their tour who like absolutely just hated the US. For everybody that says Canadians are always nice, like this guy had a lot of American rage, dude. Like he hated everything about the US. Which, I mean, probably justified at some points, but the crew was very interesting because, as a lot of you know, I work for Electric Callboy now, and I love this crew and band. Like, they're the nicest people I've ever worked with. I love all of them dearly. And it's also because they have like a camaraderie that you don't usually see with a lot of bands. The band treats their crew like they are a part of the band at times. And the first time I ever saw this was actually with Walk Off the Earth. I couldn't figure out who was actually in the band because they all treated their crew members like they were essential parts of the band as well. The first show I did with them was at, I think it was the Varsity Theater up in Minnesota. And this is I'll never forget the dumb thing about this tour, in my opinion, and this is a booking agent thing, not a band thing. The tour started in January, I think of like 2013. And the first like month of it was all northern states and like Canada in January and February. Just freezing balls all the time. Snowy and icy load-ins and loadouts and stuff. Like, it was just fucking whoever booked that tour, dude. Jesus Christ. But it's always awkward starting a tour for the first time because you meet people and you meet so many people that you forget who you met. So I remember like I met one of their lead singers, Marshall, and I was like, yeah, hey, I'm your new merch guy, and he was really cool. And then 20 minutes later, I met somebody else that Marshall happened to be with, and then I was like, hey man, I'm Ian. And he goes, yeah, we just met like 10 minutes ago. And I'm like, oh, sorry. Like, it was just very awkward and weird. Yeah, just the coolest people, man. Like, almost like they weren't hippies, but they almost had like a hippie vibe. They were just really relaxed, chill, like to smoke here and there, like to drink here and there. It was just a really good vibe. And very quickly, it became one of my favorite tours I had done to that point because of just, again, the vibe. For nobody that's ever seen their show, it is super high energy and good vibes. Like, I would actually say it's kind of family friendly too. Like, you could bring your kids and, you know, there's not like moshing or anything. It's very like alternative music. And at the Varsity Theater, I was selling merch that night. And where the merch booth is in the Varsity Theaters, you can see the stage perfectly. So I got to watch the whole show, the first show of the tour. And I was just astounded because where I said they treated their crew like they were a part of the band, the crew literally was a part of the band. They had their essential 5 band members, like drummer, guitar player, keyboard player, a couple singers, but they also had an auxiliary guitar player, and the crew would take turns playing bass. Also, the band would swap instruments. Like, almost every other song, the band was rotating, playing different instruments. It was wild. And then on like, there was one song where like the drummer came out and played bass for a song, and then the monitor engineer came on stage and played drums. They literally involved every single person in that stage crew in the show at some point. You know, very quickly, I just hit it off with them, probably because I love poutine and hockey, and those are very Canadian things. And my wife always hated when I'd come home from tour with these guys because they're all from outside Toronto, and they have those very thick Ontario accents, and I pick up on that very quick. So I'd come home sounding Canadian as fuck, walk through the front door, look at my wife. Oh, how's she going there, bud? I mean, I don't think that literally happened, but like, she would jokingly be like, you need to stop touring with these guys because you come home sounding like fucking Terrence and Phillip from South Park.
He's not your friend, guy.
But man, the start of that tour was so great because the people were just great. What was wild was that tour was 2 tour buses, and it wasn't like the band was on one bus and the crew was on the other. It was, we had a party bus and baby bus, because at the time Sarah and Gianni had just had a kid. So one of the buses was where their kid was on tour with us, and one of the buses was like the baby bus where Sarah was always with her kid and they had a nanny on tour, and then the other bus where like the crew was most of the time was like the loud bus. And they swapped buses a lot. If you were having a night where you knew you wanted to be loud and party, you could ride the fucking party bus or the loud bus. And if you had a night where you wanted to just be quiet and chill and get a good night's sleep, you could go over to the other bus where everybody was quiet and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. Everybody swapped back and forth all the time. Like, there was no separation of the band and crew ever. And we had some of the funnest nights on that tour, man. Like, we just finished a show, and then we'd get on the bus, drink, smoke, hang out, bring some acoustic guitars on the bus, and just have like jams until like 5 a.m. It was a regular thing on that tour that I would go to bed like when the sun came up. Like, everybody. Because we would just have such a good time hanging out with each other that like nobody wanted to go to bed and relax. Like, we just had the best time. So as this tour went on, inevitably, like, a lot of people on their band and crew had nicknames. And as I said, tour nicknames are a thing. And one day they realized they're like, Ian doesn't have a nickname. And they were trying to think of stuff, but nothing, ever stuck. And one day, I can't remember where we were. I think it was in Florida. A club venue in Florida somewhere. I can't remember which one. And also what you need to know for the story is I started out getting placed on that tour just to do merchandise, but I very quickly, they didn't have a drum tech out with them. And when they found out that I had drum teched for previous bands, they were like, can we kick you extra money so that you can like drum tech during the day if you can still get merch done and stuff. So I actually started drum teching and doing merchandise on that tour. And when I work in any environment, my mind is on what I'm doing. I have no spatial awareness and I move very fast. And one day I was doing something and I was moving around on stage and I just absolutely crushed their guitar player. Like I turned and he was just there and I knocked him over. He's like, Jesus Christ, dude. He's like, you hit me like a fucking tank. And I could kind of see it in his face right there. He was just like, that's it. He's like, you're Tank. And at the time, I think part of that too became a joke because like I was still drinking at the time. Like I never got like stupid on this tour, but like I had a very high alcohol tolerance and like not trying to brag, but the Tank thing was fitting because every night after show, I'd just be like fucking pounding Guinness and Jameson and hanging out and stuff. And he started telling everybody on the crew, like, you know, what happened and that he was going to call me Tank. And I remember like one of the singers, I think it was Sarah, was like, man, that actually is kind of fitting because like he's just stocky and he moves around fast and just crashes into everybody. They're like, how do you feel about being called Tank? And I was just like, the same thing I've told everybody else. Like, you can call me whatever you want as long as you pay me. So it started becoming Tank. And for the first couple like days of it, it felt really weird. And like, I never got like used to it. They'd be like Tank. And I'd be like, not paying attention. They're like Tank. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. What? So it just kind of stuck. And I never intended making a thing out of it. The whole Tank the Tech thing from YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that is accident. Like, I can't remember what my old handle on Instagram was, but I'll actually attribute it to their monitor engineer. Awesome dude. We used to hang out on days off and play NHL on Xbox and just fucking really cool dude. And I remember being like, well, now that I have this nickname, maybe this should be like the thing. Like everybody on tour has a nickname. Maybe I should let this stick. So I was like thinking about like rebranding my Instagram. And at the time I had like 500 followers. Like rebranding is kind of a weird way to put it. I was like, yeah, how can I get Tank into like an Instagram handle or something like that? And I can't remember what the first couple I came up with were. It's like Tank on Tour or Tank Techs or something like that. Their monitor engineer was just like, what about just Tank the Tech? And that's kind of where like that came from. It was just him just shooting out ideas, and Tank the Tech ended up being my Instagram handle. In the middle of that tour, I changed it, and then it kind of just caught on. Even tours after that were like calling me Tank when I had never toured with them, just because they knew from my Instagram. Because that happens when people get hired for tours and stuff. They do their due diligence. They'll look at your Instagram. They'll look at your social media, check it out. So like even when I got hired for tours after that, people were already calling me Tank, and just from my Instagram handle. And again, at that time I had no YouTube and I didn't really have a following. It was just Tank was the tour nickname that happened. It's almost just kind of coincidental and fitting that that was a thing when I decided to start YouTube, because it's not like when I started YouTube, I had to like sit and think of something. It was just Tank the Tech. That's what I already use for Instagram and whatever. So yeah, I mean, the Tank nickname is literally just because I drank a lot and I worked fast and ran people over all the time. That was really about it. There's nothing like super crazy. I've had people trying to insult me on YouTube that are like, dude, your nickname's Tank. You don't look like a tank. And I'm like, I mean, it's not because I'm like a huge dude or anything, but do I still run people over? Yeah, it happens. Like, I think even the Electric Callboy guys could attest that like when my mind is on something, like bull in a china shop, I think I get that from my mom. My mom's the same way. Like Claire jokes about that when my mom visits us in the house. She's always moving around fast and like just knocks into everything. I get that from my mom. But yeah, it's always interesting when I start tours now too. Like, especially with the YouTube thing and the social media presence and stuff now, most people know me as Tank or Tank the Tech. And I actually find it weirder when I hear the full one. Like when people are like, oh, Tank the Tech. I'm like, you can just say Tank. It's fine. But people always ask me like how I prefer to be addressed. Like, do you want to be called Tank or do you want to be called Ian? And I'm like, I don't care. Again, it's the same thing. It's like, I don't care. As long as I get paid, you can call me dickhead if you want and I'll still work. Fucking whatever. But I will say, I don't think I've ever introduced myself to somebody as Tank. That feels weird. I feel weird introducing myself with a nickname. So when I advance shows, like with venues or when I meet people on the road and stuff like that, I introduce myself as Ian every time. And that's also caused for some hilarious moments where, like, you know, I'll advance shows with venues. They just know my name, Ian, from my introduction to my emails and stuff. And then when I meet them in person at the show, they're like, oh, you're Tank the Tech. That happened a lot on our last US tour. Like, I'd advance the whole tour as just Ian, like the tour manager for Electric Callboy. And then I'd show up to the venue and they'd be like, oh, you're Tank from YouTube. Or they know that it's me right away and they don't say anything until later, which I think has made for a funny thing in some venues where, especially after my video about Blue Ridge, it's almost been beneficial. Like when some venues advance with me and they know that it's like, this sounds arrogant and I don't mean it to, but it's like when they know that it's like Tank the Tech, I think they're almost more on the ball because they're like, some of these venues are worried I'm going to make a video about them or something, which I would never do. Like, it would literally have to be a Blue Ridge situation for me to like call something out. I'm not going to call out a venue because they didn't put our picture of David Hasselhoff in the dressing room. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to happen. But yeah, like the nickname has started kind of like preceding me at this point, and it's just kind of really funny. But that is the origin story of Tank and Tank the Tech. It all comes from Walk Off the Earth and their band and crew. So maybe not as wild of a story as you'd expect from Roadie Storytime, but it is a part of my, you know, journey as being a roadie and some fun stuff that happened. And there's probably some other Walk Off the Earth stories I could tell at a later time about just some of our fun times on tour and stuff like that. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you again to everybody that was on Twitch. I appreciate you being here. And again, you can go to twitch.tv/tankthetech if you'd like to join us for these when we do them live. Also on a ton of social media, @tankthetech is my handle on just about everything. And I post a lot when I'm on tour and stuff like that. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, be safe, be kind to each other. And I love you all. And I will see you very soon.